like failure is feedback, and that's how you actually go and pursue these goals and dreams. It's like you actually, like, all these things that you're mentioning, Unica, like they're powerful because they come from the real world execution.
Failure is a very natural part of life. Like none of us were born knowing how to walk. We had to fall down and wobble all over the place and scrape
Right.
some knees. And then next thing you know, we're off, running triathlons and things at some point in life. But
Welcome to another edition of the Go For It podcast, the podcast where we are pursuing our dreams, chasing our goals, and pushing towards them despite any anxieties or fears that we may have. With that being said, a lot of people have asked me about starting a podcast. This is number 17, and I have a treat for you guys. I have a fellow content creator, and rather than hearing it from me, I'd like for us to meet Uniqueka Walcott, who has started the Career Conversations podcast. I've seen it live on LinkedIn multiple times, checked it out a few times, and yeah, it's kind of cool to see somebody starting up their podcast. And I'd love to change it up this time and have Uniqueka present herself and introduce herself, and let's talk about what it takes to start a podcast.
Well, hello. Hey, Josh, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I'm the host and producer of Career Conversations, which is on LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, quite a few places. Also a marketer by day. I work at an environmental science firm, mostly managing proposals, which is probably not what people think of when they think of marketing. And I have a BA from Georgia State University in journalism and good amount of experience working at commercial radio stations and things earlier in my career that I think were a huge plus, and feeling confident in taking the leap for the podcast.
Excellent. Okay. Wait, is Georgia State the one with is that an Eagle mascot, or is that Georgia Southern?
I think that's Southern, and we have the wonderful rival of the real GSU, Georgia State versus Georgia Southern.
I
went to State, and we're the
that.
Panthers. That's probably why you got it, mixed up. But it's all about the Panther life,
For sure. Okay. Well, so I was looking at your LinkedIn description, and you said something really interesting about the Career Conversations podcast. So number one, I'd like for you to just tell us what it actually is, what made you want to start it. But then you said, hey, I'm just going to record 3 episodes, no matter how it goes. Like what had you thinking about Career Conversations, and what made you actually take the leap?
Okay, so what had me thinking about Career Conversations is like really my own career journey and experience. Is not what I expected or I planned for at all. A lot of us grow up, we go, okay, I'm going to be a doctor or a lawyer, whatever specific thing they have in mind. Like for me, I grew up knowing, okay, I want to go into journalism. Like my mother would literally turn on the news, anthem, in our town, to get me to be quiet as a baby. So it was really a thing that was in my heart to do. Or as I tell people in college, I did not change majors. I changed schools. But what I wanted to do never changed. So flash forward, here we are in a decade plus into a career. I started out actually in mortgage after college, after probably way too long in retail. And then eventually from retail to mortgage, now to architecture, engineering, construction, marketing, or as people say, AEC, industry marketing, professional services. And so when I decided to do this podcast, I was like, a lot of us are in this, really roughed up space. There's a great resignation. Everybody's having this identity crisis and great awakening sort of experience of well, maybe I'm not my job title. I'm that is absolutely the truth. And so for me, Career Conversations is a way to peel back the layers on identity for people who happen to be professionals. That's really what it is. And so that way people can get a sneak peek. Okay, well, maybe I think I want to be a mariner when I grow up, and I want to be on boats and ships. What does that look like? So I have a guest, that was actually my first guest on the podcast. She talked about her experience as a Black woman working on ships, and not actually in the ocean, but actually the Great Lakes area of Michigan. So it's really finding those people that got these unique careers and journeys, and illuminating the whole person behind it. Is really what Career Conversations is about, and also networking connection. A lot of my guests come on and say, here's my contact information, here's my credentials. I'm open to mentoring people. it's also a way to level the playing field and build equity, so people can't go, hey, I couldn't find a job in X industry or thing I wanted to be when I grow up, where I got college experience but I don't know the people. Career Conversations is your space. Come find your people.
Right. So you're saying like, if you can find an industry that you want to get into, and a lot of people that come on the Career Conversations podcast, they're already wanting to help people get into that career, because that's what it's about, right? Career Conversations, come hit me up.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot of great people. I've even talked to retirees, Miss Mickey Fields Witherspoon. Great guest. But she is like in her 70s, which I was like stunned to learn. But she like retired from Verizon and decided to move on and do some different things with her life. And so now she's an artist, like, and a travel agent. So she's got art that's literally being sold in Walmart, like, and
Wow.
and making custom orders for like Domino's and different things. Like, nobody thinks about retirement that way. We're all like, okay, we're gonna get our little tiki, huddle on the beach with our fruit flavored alcohol drinking, like ride it out till death comes. Like, I love
Okay. Goodness.
I'm just being real honest. Like, that's usually
Right.
people's retirement plan. And so she really reshaped the way that I view retirement. Like, life doesn't stop because you quit your job. Your job is not your life. Like, and so that's what I love about my guests, and why I'm very open to like who can be on. Like, who, is it just for women? I was like, no, I talk to anyone who's really kind of sharing the same mindset that like we need to help, be the next rung on the ladder for somebody.
Right. So is that what made you want to start the podcast? What was the initial idea? Because now you've started it, you're now creating this networking community where people can enter into brand new career paths. Take us back to the very beginning.
Oh, look, I was sitting at my desk probably in the middle of like a work day, and I have like a gajillion ideas floating around my head all the time. I'm like, oh, I could start this or I could do that. My friend, like I said, I've been accused of being like an inspiration hoarder. Like, I can, suddenly think I can paint or whatever the heck, or write a book. Like, I've got all kinds of ideas of projects and things that I could pursue all the time. Just because I feel like I don't have to be great at everything, but I'm like really looking for what brings me joy. And so when I decided to take on Career Conversations, I wasn't sure if it was going to be a long-term project. I was like, this is a fleeting idea. I said, but you always let these things go and don't really explore them. I said, what if you just decided that, okay, you don't have to say that you're suddenly married to this thing and you got to do it for the next 10 years. I think that's sometimes how we view a lot of the things. We begin to go, well, I'm going to become this and I've got to go all the way. Well, maybe you just try it on for 2 days, and if you don't like it, try something else. And
Right.
so that was my thought process behind Career Conversations. I was like, I'm going to literally do just 3 episodes. I said, if I don't have strong feelings, like if I'm ambivalent, if I don't love it or hate it, I'll do 10. And so after doing 10, we turned into a year later, 30 or so episodes. And I don't have any plans to stop anytime soon. In fact, I've got probably 7 interviews booked this month that I'm prepared to put together to put out soon. And so what I've just done is kind of learn from that experience. Like, my first couple episodes were actually a dumpster fire in terms of like the process. Like, it was not this like clean, crisp sort of thing, because I actually decided to do it with LinkedIn Live. That's where this all started. And so these are live episodes, real in the moment. I can't edit this or make somebody take it back, sort of experiences. And so there was one episode, I was talking to Amanda Murphy. She works at a nonprofit and she's a marketer there. She's also running for office in North Carolina, which is really cool. And during the middle of the interview, like, I think my laptop battery was dying and the internet connection was like shoddy and I was too far from the router. So I'm like literally picking up my laptop, like, and carrying it like out of one room into the next, and like plugging like the cable for the laptop into my laptop so that I don't lose my internet connection during my live show, all the while still trying to hold a conversation with her and like kind of listening and engaging. And then eventually like realizing like my cord's not long enough. So I like sit on the floor next to my couch. There's like laundry all on the back of the couch if you watch this episode. And I'm still like keeping the conversation going. But like, that's when I knew. I was like, this is what you love. If you're willing to go to those extremes and suffer a little bit of embarrassment, even, because nobody wants to be broadcasting their laundry.
Right, exactly.
This is it for me. And also the phone calls, the emails, like the communication with family and friends really let me know like this is something that I don't want to put down. It's very unlikely you find things that feel like the thing you were born to do.
Wow.
And at first I thought people were like joking with me, like, but oh, this looks like, so natural, this is like your thing. Or, like great uncles I haven't talked to in forever. Like, I thought that was your job. I was like, it's not, it's just something I love to do. And so that's why I keep doing it. People are, like, say they watch and they could just like see the joy like emanating from me as well as my guests. And whenever like I close out my episodes, everyone's like, oh, that was actually fun. I was so nervous. And I was like, that is literally my goal, is to hold space for you to feel like you belong and are comfortable and can talk about your lived experiences in a real way, and not that fake fluffy way when you show up to some place and you got a code switch and put your wig on or whatever it is you do to make
Right.
other people comfortable in your presence. So like that's really why I love it, because it's such a like real thing and it's a mutual thing.
Right. So you glossed over the mental hurdle, and I think I really want to dig into that, because
Okay.
what I really want to focus on with the Go For It podcast is you said specifically that I'm going to record 3 episodes, and I didn't want to commit. I think we limit ourselves when we try and commit to things long term, as opposed to, hey, I'll do 3 episodes. If I kind of like it or not, I'll do 10 episodes. Another thing you mentioned, I don't want everybody to see my laundry. Like, I think a lot of people get in the way of, oh, I don't want to look stupid on LinkedIn. Like, this is my professional network. Like, I'm live. I got my laundry everywhere. I'm plugging in a laptop. I look ridiculous. I'm just saying, like, how the mentality. I'm not saying what it was. I actually never said
Oh
something.
yeah, no. So mentality wise, like, I think that you have to be open to the risk of being embarrassed. Like, I think that's the biggest thing. But also what I have realized is like everyone else is human too. Like, we're all having these same weird, uncomfortable experiences. And if nothing else, it makes me relatable. Like, could you imagine, like, you know, the fandom that people have when like they see celebrities and things? Like, I feel like that's what makes it different, is if you can show up and be like your actual self and be like, I mean, there's been episodes I've realized like, wait, you got like nail polish on 3 fingers still. And the rest is off. But it's like,
Yeah.
But it's like the content, if like what you're doing is for other people, then you have to make it about other people. It's not about you. Like, yeah, show up and make sure you're okay and your well-being and your mental health is all, in order, and your physical health is in order. Like, don't show up sick or be so overly committed that you're, destructive to yourself. But really keep it light when you make these kind of commitments. So give yourself the grace that you would give total strangers.
Wow.
I think that's so important, because a lot of times the things that you are picking yourself apart about, nobody even notices. Like the stuff I'm telling you, I'm sure people are like, if they're really obsessed and weird, they're gonna go back and like look for this. But most people never notice. Like, right, that wasn't a part of the conversation for them. They were more interested in a woman who said, Google feels like home.
I love it. Yeah. So one of my most popular episode of Go For It podcast was with a guy that I met that runs the largest political Discord server on the Discord platform, which is sort of like text and voice communication for gamers. He's got a huge server, and it's the most popular podcast I have. And I recorded it in Discord, and I was using some sort of technology that I've never used before. And if you go and listen to that, it completely unintelligible in certain parts, but his story was so compelling that it didn't matter. Like, and I was recording it, I didn't know what I was doing. Like, even 17 episodes in, I still don't have like a professional setup. So hearing you say just go for it anyway. I think what I kind of want to transition to is, as I'm listening to you and I know my own experience of just put it out there. You can get better over time. Like, mm-hmm. I've had people talk to me and say that, hey, you need to do an intro at the beginning of your podcast. And do you have any music? And like, people are going to give you feedback because they want to see you win.
But you wanted me to talk a little bit more mindset. I think that's what we were on before I got like distracted.
No, the new thing is, like, if somebody were to say, hey, I want to start a podcast, Uniqueka, like, do you have any advice? Like, what would you say to them in terms of like just technical things?
Technical things, I would say, don't get hung up on the podcast name. I think that is one of those places that stresses people out way too much. Here's the thing: whatever you decide, you can change your mind. Like, there's no law that says you can't. So go update it, shift it, redirect people to a new link, whatever you need to do. But like you said, if you've got a recording device and internet access, you could do a podcast. So you don't have to have the fancy Yeti mic or whatever it is, and windscreens and super top-notch, stuff. Like, I mean, Zoom is free for 30 minutes. You can have a conversation with somebody, and and hit record and then download and edit it. Heck, Adobe Premiere Pro is a free editing software. So maybe you don't have money for, excuse me, is it Premiere Pro? It's not Premiere Pro. It is Premiere Pro because there's one that's shorter.
Okay.
And so I'll double check. It's actually in my toolkit. I have like a little embody the brand toolkit that I put together for personal branding for a training I did a while back. But yeah, like there's actual like, cheap and free tools for you to do this. Like there's really no reason you can't get it done. Like other than just committing the time. And maybe you go, well, this is overwhelming and I can't produce, 4 episodes a month or whatever. Well, once a month is a consistency. The biggest thing is just consistency and commitment. I think those are the 2 biggest barriers to get started. Commit to something and be consistent. That's it.
Right. Right.
And realizing you can reserve the right to change your mind. I tell people all the time, they go, oh, like my personal like 3 sort of pillars as far as like life and career is concerned is reading, resilience, and relationships. And so when I talk about resilience, I make sure that I tell people that rest is important. Reserving the right to change your mind is important. Like if something doesn't suit you or who you've become, because we are all changing. None of us are the same person we were yesterday, much less 2 years ago, having survived the global pandemic. So there are going to be things that no longer interest you. Have the audacity to walk away from them and walk into what's next.
Right.
So yeah, from a technical point, like, yeah, if you get a mic, get a webcam, all that's great. But really, if you got a voice, a recording device, and someplace to load it, that's all you need. Like the rest of it will come. In fact, I wouldn't suggest investing money in ring lights and special cameras and all that stuff. Just say you get 3 episodes in, like I did, and say, oh, this is the worst thing I ever decided. Then that's $200 you could have spent on Lizzo concert tickets instead of the equipment.
Well, okay, so there's somebody listening to you right now who's saying, oh, that sounds good, but that's going to look bad for my brand. And I want my stuff to be Joe Rogan level and very production quality. Like, what would you have to say to the person?
Joe Rogan has a team and a whole lot of money and and frankly, if we're talking about dismantling certain sort of cultural norms, the way to do that's for you to show up as your whole self, exactly as you are right now, and not wait for permission for other people to tell you that what you got is good enough. Like, it's just that simple to me. Like, you can wait for everybody else's permission to validate you or say, in order for my voice to be valid and for it to be worthy of being heard, I've got to have a Joe Rogan style podcast where he's probably got a team of 20 or 30 people. There's someone that's editing, the broadcast piece of it. There's someone that is probably uploading the darn thing. There's someone that is going out and booking his guests. There's so much work that goes into being a content creator. To ask of yourself to produce something that someone else does with 20 people is not fair.
Right.
Or really even to ask yourself to do something that they do with 3 or 4 other people is not fair. And that's what we talk about. We talk about equity. We talk about grace. Like, don't silence yourself because you don't have all the right tools. If anything, come to the table and say, look, this is what I'm aiming to create. If you can support me in this, load some money to my Patreon so I can upgrade.
I like it. Yes. I know that there's huge holes in my own podcast. I definitely want to get a real microphone, like music intro, music outro, like.
Ooh, a good tool for some of this. Canva, or find someone. You probably got a bunch of talented friends that are like making music and beats, trying to find their break.
Right.
Call and reach out to your network. I think that Issa Rae is an example of that. She says, look, when I got started, before she was, Issa Rae on HBO Insecure, she was like, I was talking to my college friends and shooting shows in my dorm room. Wow. Like talking to people who wanted to be this or that and bringing those talents together. Like, so really, like, I think Bone and Bo calls it a coalition of the willing. So find your coalition of the willing, the people who are willing to believe in what you got. And maybe you can't pay them $1,000, but if you got $100 to respect their gift, do that. Or maybe it's a barter and an agreement that, like, look, if this, if we decide that we are suddenly, on our Heart Radio level and we're a sponsored podcast, here's a percentage, or whatever agreement you want to broker with your people. But really, like, just be committed so much to whatever the vision is that it doesn't stop you. Like, what if it's not perfect? Because I'm a firm believer in scripture that says your gifts will make room for you. And so if your gifts are going to make room for you, then you have got to be willing to take the steps. Like I can't expand what don't exist.
Right. Exactly.
Like, so, give God a little bit and let him make it a lot.
Yeah, that's important because a lot of people get stuck on trying to do it perfect the first time, and like, why not just get better over time? It's a great, in my opinion, it's a great story because people, the OGs that listened to you originally, they're gonna know where you came from, and that's only
Right.
gonna
Think
endear
about some of
themselves to you.
your favorite artists and the terrible mixtapes they put out
Right,
before they were like hot.
right,
Like
right.
you would never hear some of the stuff that's on these mixtapes on the air because not just because of the foul language and FCC regulations, but because the quality is not up to the standard to put it next to some of the other stuff. But say Cardi B never did mixtapes. Will we know Cardi B exists?
We would not.
Luda selling, CDs out of his trunk in Atlanta. How will we know these people exist if they didn't have the audacity to believe in themselves and their message and their voice so much that nothing stopped them? That there was no obstacle. There was only how can I use what I got in my hand to make it happen?
Right.
So you got a phone, you got access to the internet, you got a digital voice recorder on here, 9 out of 10. You don't even have to have the fanciest, most up-to-date equipment. Like you could produce a whole show with your phone. Like there's literally nothing stopping you. If you got a phone, you got a way to get it done.
That's a fact.
Anchor is free. Anchor.fm, that's your way to distribute all your content across Google, Spotify, all of these places all at once. Get an account, upload your files, give it a title, pick a stock image, use Canva if you need to. There's free. There's so many tools and resources that are free to you to get started. Like there's no excuse other than the excuses you offer yourself. And do you really want to be on your deathbed and go, I wish I had it, and the excuse was I didn't think that it was good enough to show anybody. I mean, the other reality is when you get started, 3 people are watching anyway.
Right, exactly. Yep, exactly.
Like, I hate to humble us, but like 3 people are watching anyway. Your grandma, your mama, and probably your cat. Like, have the audacity to put on a show that is world class for them to the best of your ability and grow from there. I mean, honestly, if I had focused on numbers and viewership for my podcast, I wouldn't be doing it a year later because I can't tell you how many times I logged into LinkedIn Live and the little red dot in the corner said I had 1 or 2 viewers. But what kept me going is I would get these phone calls, these text messages, these inboxes from complete strangers. I really enjoyed your show. This inspired me. I mean, just out of nowhere. And so I was like, so if I was waiting on numbers like we're waiting on likes and followers, then I would have minimized and diminished my own impact. I met one young lady in Arkansas. She was eventually a guest on my show. She said, my whole life has changed and the way that I moved through my career has changed, all because of one Saturday morning I couldn't sleep. I found your show. The next thing you know, we connected and I became her mentor. So
that's
like,
powerful.
that's what I want people to realize. Like, that's how your voice matters. Like, we aren't, a lot of times we're told that our influence, is based on, our ratings and scores and the reviews of our podcast. We're a 5-star podcast. Do we have, 1 million plus viewers? Every time I post something, do I get like 500 likes? Like, that is not impact. And so when you understand how important your voice is, how important your story is, like stories are so timeless. Like even in 2022, we're still writing books and publishing books because people love stories. Stories are like the most basic of human social currency because they teach us what not to do or what to do or how to overcome different things and shift our mindsets. Like books are important, but books aren't important because of their physicality. It's because of the stories, the knowledge. And you are a living, walking, breathing book. How dare you not share your story?
Right. Yeah, so I actually have an anecdote, a small anecdote on that, because this podcast, my last episode only had 6 listens, and I was talking about getting your first job after college. And the 2 episodes before that had like 55. So for me, this is 55 listens, 58 listens. For me, that's big because the episodes before that were like 20 and 20. And then like the episode came out that I was very passionate about, but it was very niche because I was talking to a particular subset of people, engineers in college, particularly my college. And I think that it was very valuable content. And so if I was doing it purely for the numbers or like the accolades, like that would be, so I'm mentioning it, of course, because it was discouraging, right? So
right.
Like,
that's
not
human.
to run away from that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that as much as we talk about things like, sitting with our discomfort, like we're always pointing that at other people and going, you got to sit with your discomfort when we talk about race or gender, or sit with your discomfort and doing things that make you uncomfortable, but you think are important. Like,
Right. Exactly.
and so that's how Go For It podcast is still going. Like, and I'm so glad that you have decided to keep going. Like, thank you for inviting me. I think this is probably the only second podcast I've been invited to speak on. I was like, oh, that's cool. Like,
Right.
so this is exciting for me. Like, you're creating space for me, and I appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, actually, that leads into another thing that somebody may want to ask. The vast majority of podcasts out there are this style, where there's a host and a guest and all that stuff. So, how do you find all the guests for your podcast, especially for all these different career verticals that you're trying to reach? Like, I'm sure your network is going to dry up at some point. Like, how do you find these people?
Look, if my network dries up, I'm doing it wrong. I'll start there. But really, like, a lot of it has been truly my network and talking to close family and friends, even people I have just met, and being genuinely interested in who they are and what they're doing and why. And so sometimes I'll have people call me and be like, I know you said last week you really want to talk to a scientist. Well, guess what, girl? I ran into a scientist. Like,
there you go. Wow.
And, so that's a lot of how it's like happening. Like, I really just, say very clearly what it is I desire. I share that with family. I share that with friends. Hey, what am I looking for? If there's something particular, one of my sisters, my god sister, said, "Hey, why you didn't invite me yet?" I said, "Because I didn't know what you do." But she's a mortician.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah. So, like, really, like, I mean, I think that the best thing about this podcast is that it's something that most people have as a job. So people are willing to talk about that.
Right.
And then we dive into the personhood part. But finding guests can definitely be tough. I would recommend, exploring networks. Like, there are podcast Facebook groups where people are looking for guests.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so like jump in a couple of those groups on Facebook. There are people, or entrepreneurship groups, or whatever it is you're focused on. Maybe you want to talk about gardening and horticulture. Go join the beekeeping group and the gardening group. Like, there's groups of people that have those interests. Go be a little fly on the wall. Maybe you don't have a lot to say about something as an expert, perhaps, but the invitation to amplify people's voices and their passions is really not usually a hard game in finding guests in that way. Because if people are passionate about stuff, they're going to talk to you, even if they're a little shy. I've had people go, "I'm really uncomfortable, I'm really nervous." Look, send them to me, I'll help get them ready. Like, I'm, part of my work and my day-to-day is like, I work for engineers. A lot of them tend to be very introverted people, so they're like, "I don't want to talk in front of people, this is really uncomfortable." So I've gotten really good at like coaching people to find their way and to just talk to folks. But yeah, that would be my suggestion. Check out LinkedIn groups, Facebook groups, jump in a clubhouse, different things. Like, so really just look, again, you got a phone. Like, the internet is your oyster. Like find the spaces where the people you were looking for are hanging out. Like, in marketing, we talk about like psychographics and like dropping yourself into the mindset and persona of the person that you want to be around or attract to your product. Very much the same goes for looking for podcast guests. Like, if you're looking for guests that have got like a very go for it attitude, entrepreneurs are obviously one of those groups that's got a very go for it sort of attitude. You might find a lot of different variety of folks in that space if you join some groups of that nature, or a mastermind. So like, just depending on your topic, like, there's some people that want to talk about crime blogs. Maybe you might want to spend some time at the local law school, like, or reach out to the professors there and, "Hey, do you have students that want to talk about this? Or do you have professors who would be open to talking about this?" A lot of times people are looking to build their networks and exposure, or talk about their research and build around the body of knowledge that's available. So like, there's so many ways, but I think it's just important to like drop yourself into like, okay, this is the guest I want, or these are the pool of people I want to have as a pool of guests. Go where they are and make the invitation. And also get your group of people who are really caping for you and excited about what you're doing to let people know, hey, this is what I'm looking for. So when they meet somebody, they can just make the introduction.
Right. I love it. Yeah, it kind of just happens. At least for me, when I find people that are interesting like yourself, I typically just say, "Hey, I'd love to have you on my podcast." And typically, just that is enough, because like it's flattering. If everybody gets their 15 seconds of fame, like it's really easy, like to get somebody on a podcast, because people want to talk about themselves. So and it's flattering to people. And like, if it's just top of mind, like for you, like career conversations is top of mind. Like, when I'm talking to somebody and I hear something that's really cool and I think it could be really encouraging to somebody, I'm like, "Man, I'd love to have you on my podcast." And I've always had just over the moon responses to that statement or question.
Oh, that's great. Yes. So you already know, like this podcast guest hunt is not as difficult as it could be. And I've been very grateful for that.
Right. Yeah. So I'm just trying to ask on behalf of the person who's listening to this and doesn't.
Where do I find? Yeah. Where do I find guests? Where do I find these people? I think that, and the other part of this and finding guests is like having a clear mechanism for like booking, because for some people that hurdle is the stress point at which they fall off and go, look, no thanks, I'm not dealing with this stuff. I gotta go 5 rounds of email with you to figure out what day we doing this. Calendly. Great tool. They've got, at least one calendar you can have for free. Say for me, if I know that Tuesdays and Thursday evenings are best, I'm going to open my calendar for the next 4 weeks, have some slots. Hey, send out an email. Hey, would you be open to interviewing? Here's my calendar. Let me know which times work for you. I think the only caveat set is if you're working with like international guests or things of that nature, you might have to be mindful to open up slots that are going to work so that people aren't recording or join your podcast at 2:00 in the morning their time.
Right.
You laugh, but I had those moments. I was like, wait, it's 3:00, it's 2:00 there, like AM. Okay, we're gonna have to move this to Saturday, and that those sort of things. But yeah, like use tools that make your life simple. Or if you know that 6:00 on Tuesdays and Thursdays for the next 3 weeks is your availability, when you make the invitation, give that to them. And that way you can connect the dots quickly. I think that helps solidify things, because a verbal yes is one thing, to have like an actual agreement is another.
Right. Yeah. So we've talked about a few different things. And so what if somebody says like, oh, where do you find the time, Uniqueka? I mean, don't you have a husband and like you got a job? Where do you find the time to do all this podcasting stuff? You said 7 podcasts this month.
Well, those are just the interviews. I have to go in and edit. One of the tools that another fellow podcaster told me about, she told me about Descript. And so I'm using that tool. It's great. It's really, really easy it takes the text version of like your interview. And like, so then you can literally look at it and like edit out all the ums and stuff, like, and like edit a Word document almost. Right. And so that has been a really good tool in reducing the time that it takes to edit stuff. So that's one of the tools that's time saving. The other thing is just like, anybody else, like if there's something you love doing, like you can make time to play your video games if you love video games, excuse me, or go to the hairdresser or whatever it is that is your thing. For me, career conversations is like my thing. And I know like I tease people, I'm like, yeah, this is probably a weird hobby, but if you know me, you get it. And so I carve out time very specifically, and I set specific goals. And the first year, what I learned is that doing this episodes live at noon on Saturday was really destructive to my personal life.
Wow. Okay.
So that's the other thing about trial and error, and why I tell people like pivot, change your mind. So like doing them live is great. I kind of miss the interaction piece and like getting real time, feedback from people. But the other side of that was my husband's like, yo, we going to brunch and I'm still in here doing this thing. So that's part of the pivot I'm making, and why I'm recording, 7 episodes this month, is because now if my publication schedule is for a weekly publication, I'm now ahead for several weeks. So like if everything's calendared out, I can also start to announce then who's coming, so that I can build anticipation for these guests in these interviews. I can take snippets and I can promote them that way. So like for me, the making the time is like being intentional about how you use your time. And so now if I'm 7 episodes ahead and I decide to sit down somewhere for 2 weeks and don't do anything related to the podcast and engage in my actual real life, I've got that space. The other part is sometimes I would just get up before work and be like, let me, do this thing or that thing. Maybe, send out a couple emails. Like my invitation email is a template actually at this point. Yep. And so Google allows you to create email templates. And so all I can go, and that's probably terrible. My guests are going to be like, oh no, that's terrible. But I go in and, change the name. My Calendly link is pretty evergreen. It's the link is the link for this particular calendar. And it's, I've got it open for 60 rolling days. So I've got the link in. I say, hey, hello, thank you for agreeing. We've already talked at this point. I'm not just cold sending this email with somebody that's already said yes to me. So I'm sending them this email with the details about, okay, expect to get a StreamYard link at this, at this juncture. Here are the questions. And I've got the same 8 questions I started with from the day of my podcast that have just been rinse and repeat, because it's a way to get the conversation going. And so like by automating these, like I can literally send out like my 5 like official invites on the way to dinner on Wednesday night with my husband. Right. Like we're in the car chat and I'm like, type, send. By the time we, then drove the 25 minutes to go to dinner or whatever, and he's like jamming out to whatever music, I'm now back to my regular life and present to enjoy my evening. Like, and so just kind of finding small hacks and like small pockets to do some of the tasks. Like, not everything has to get done. Like, if I sat down and said I'm going to edit like all 7 episodes coming up like in a day, I mean, that's a little bit insane and absurd. But if I say, okay, I'm going to block out 2 hours this week to edit through these things or whatever, however I want to do it. Like, I think it's about finding those little pockets of time and figuring out what little tasks are redundant and repetitive that can be automated or simplified. I mean, imagine typing 10 emails when you could just like, change the name and drop a link and say thank you and let people respond in their time. I mean, even something as simple as scheduling the emails. Like, maybe you don't want to send them at 7 p.m. because you don't want people to have the impression they should call you at 7 p.m. about something. I could have scheduled emails to go out, 8:30 the next morning on the way to dinner. That way, everything is within this space and realm of like, these are business hours. Let's keep it this, sort of way. So yeah, just using the tools and the time and like realizing, okay, if this takes me 30 minutes to do, how many can I do? So that's the other part. Like, really, if you kind of like sit down and go, I sat down, I started at this point and I finished at this point. That like gives you an idea of how much you can accomplish and you can set realistic goals.
Right. So you touched on a very passionate topic of mine at the core of my being, actually. The reason why I actually do this podcast, which is you mentioned mistakes and like someone booking at 2 a.m. For me, I recorded a whole episode. I forgot to hit record on the recording software I use. So now at this point, and so that's why this is episode, I think, 18, but it's actually episode 17 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like, failure is feedback, and like that's how you actually go and pursue these goals and dreams. It's like you actually, like, all these things that you're mentioning, Uniqueka, like they're powerful because they come from the real world execution of doing the podcast. And oh man, like I had to run around while the podcast was going. How can I be more prepared next time? And like, it's taken me a long time to set up these interviews with people. How can I be more prepared with templates next time? Like, it's just, you just get better and better over time. And like, experience is one of the best teachers. And like, I think that's really what I'm trying to communicate with this podcast is like, I think you really embodied that in a lot of ways when you mentioned all those mistakes, because you're getting better and you're getting more efficient. Like, you're able to, you just mentioned editing 6 episodes in 2 hours. I'm sure that probably took you 6, if not 20 hours back in the day. And now you're able to get it done faster. You've got new tools. Like, I don't know. I just like to hear your thoughts on specifically that, like, even in a macro perspective, like, just doing it like that, there's so much value in just that, no matter what the outcome is.
Yeah. Failure. Oh my gosh. Failure. I'm going to agree with you. It is an excellent teacher. I think that one of the books I read fresh out of college was by Caddy Shipman called The Confidence Code. And one of the sort of tenets in the book was to fail fast.
Wow.
And that changed how I looked at a lot of life, because like, if I wasn't focused on like fast failure and really not for the sake of like failing for the sake of failing, but really stepping back and going, what did I learn in this, particular situation? What I learned about myself, like, not just the task piece of it, but like, how did this make me feel? How did I respond to it? I think that was a game changer for me. Like, I graduated magna cum laude with, 5 internships behind me, to land in a contract position making $13 an hour with no possible permanent hire at a mortgage company. Like, to me, that was like a very, very low point. I was like, dang, I did everything right and by the book and nothing. I mean, how do you intern, at like major companies, like have networks of people who are working in the industry, have participated in every, thing you can get your hands on, writing for the school newspaper, guerrilla marketing for Capitol Records, all these different things.
You were about that life.
Yes. Like, I mean, I'll put it to you this way. My senior year, this is years ago now, but my senior year, I walked into a career fair. I handed someone my resume. The man was also an entrepreneur. He looked at my resume. He said, "How long are you going to work for me? 6 months to start your own company?" Straight face, deadpan asked me that.
What?
Said, "How long are you going to work for me? 6 months to start your own company." So to go from that to being like, I got this contract gig my auntie called some friends at a temp agency for.
Yep. Yep.
And to go to the temp agency, for them to tell me take like 80% of the stuff off my resume and give them this information so they'll give you a job. Like literally, talk about failure. Like failure is not always, well, dang, I tried everything and it worked out. Sometimes it's just, it is what it is. Like people, oh, I did this and that. So you do everything right and still things will fall apart.
Right.
But it's what you do next that matters. And I think that's what you're getting at. What you do next matters. There was one of my mentors said, because I was really frustrated about something.
What mentors? What was that? You said what mentors?
So one of my mentors, she said to me, she said, a lesser person would have done something different when she watched me transition through one of my other recent failures.
Okay.
And she was like, I like how you bounce back and finesse the situation. I was like, thank you. But like it comes from like a mindset. Like that's really what you're trying to hone it. Like understand that failure is a very natural part of life. Like none of us were born knowing how to walk. We had to fall down and wobble all over the place and scrape some knees. And then next thing you know, we're off, running triathlons and things at some point in life. But it's a process to get there. We got to respect that process. In fact, failure is such a gift because it teaches you also how to be a better leader.
Okay. Wow. How's that?
Like, I mean, could you imagine like having never failed and then having a team of people that does fail, like, and being able to mentor and walk them through that and have empathy?
Right.
If you can't empathize with your team, you don't have to necessarily have the skill to do what they do. But if you can't empathize with the bad days and the rainy old crap happens moments, then you are not an effective and suitable leader, in my opinion. Like you've got to be able to level with folks and sit with them in their humanity on their worst day, and not decide that this bad moment surmises their qualifications. Like you've got to be willing to go, okay, we spent 400 days together and this has just been one really crap day. Let's chalk it up to this person didn't know better, or this thing is literally beyond their control. Perfect example. It's not so much podcast related, but like my adventure into like my current career, I took an 8-week contract position. But had I not had 18 months of contract work before coming out of school, I would have been terrified to take the contract job and move out of state. So that failure really produced the setup for where I am now.
Wait, so what would have been, what would have had you afraid? I don't understand.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So we talk about failure. So we talked about, okay, I did everything right in college, ended up with an 18-month contract job and mortgage. Yep. The recession has hit. We are blaming the housing crisis for the reason there are no jobs, like literally. And so that's a little bit ironic, but having to pay my rent every month and my car note, my car insurance, and like show up with a smile on my face and a positive attitude for like 18 or so months and take on 3 different roles at the same company, no potential for like actual hire, really gave me the courage to bet on myself. So flash forward a few years, 2 years or so into the situation, I'm dating my husband long distance. We're trying to figure, my then boyfriend, now husband, long distance. And we're trying to figure out who's going to move, because he's in Maryland and I'm in Georgia. And so we're back and forth. And I was like, well, I recognize fully that I didn't want a career in mortgage. So I was like, literally very prayerful. I was like, these are the gifts and skills that I want to use. And I don't want to bottle them up into this place where I lose the ability to do them with the same dexterity. So eventually he vouched for me at the company he worked for. They had a woman going on maternity leave and they needed help for 8 weeks doing marketing in this industry.
Yep.
And so at that point I was like, I got $1,000 in my savings account. I'm gonna quit this job, move to Maryland, which is high rent district in comparison, and see what happens. But I wouldn't have had the audacity to do that if I hadn't worked 18 months contract paying my own during rent and bills. Like I didn't have mom and dad to call and be like, I need some money. It was like, no, sis, you got to figure this out. And so I bet on myself. 8 weeks turned into 8 years in this business. And I've been wildly successful and just super blessed with like a great network of mentors and people. But if I wasn't really, comfortable with failure, the failure I thought was the failure was really the setup.
Wow. Oh man, I wish like I had sound effects or something. Like put a dime on that. Like I don't know. That's tie that up with a bow. Wow. Yeah. What a story. Dang.
Yeah, it was the setup to go from like, I'm, eating peanut butter and jelly. I got like one solid meal, like, hustling to like, me and my husband just bought a house last year, and like, things are beyond my wildest imagination. Like I think about like, 18-year-old Nika, now 35, and I'm like, doing better than I hoped, and I'm blessed. But if I wasn't open to failure or possibility, like I wouldn't be here. This is all God's grace. So a lot of times we think our failure is, I had this plan and it didn't work out. It's like, if you really believe that all things are working together for your good, you got to embrace the failure too.
Right. Yeah, like you said, it could be the setup. Like, getting fired. One of the best things that ever happened to me was getting fired from a job.
Oh my God. Talking about getting fired, I've gotten like fired on the phone on my day off.
Oh, on your day off? Oh my
Yeah.
God. On the phone? Yay, that's cold.
Yeah, I mean, but so like, but it also just is life. Like you don't have control over everything. So people talk about failure. I mean, I've talked to plenty of people that are like, the best thing that happened to me was getting fired. I launched my consulting firm and it's really worked out. And I love to hear those stories, like, because it is, believing in something bigger than yourself, that like this can work out, like whatever it is, or somebody said, look, one door closes, another one opens. Like,
right.
Like you don't really want the wrong yes, you want the right yes. Like that's what no is. No is, hey, I got they had the audacity not to give me a yes for the sake of giving me a yes. Like you need to be in the right place.
Right. Well, shoot.
Like, yeah, now you got me thinking. I'm like, even like, I think back to like my mortgage job. There are some people I met in my mortgage job that have been like my life rafts, like my good friends. Like I call like on my worst days, like ugly crying in my car. Like,
okay, yeah.
Like, so like there's so many gifts in failure.
Right. Yeah. Lifelong friends, the setup for the mentality to approach that temp position later in life. Yeah. Like it was meant for you. Like straight up. Like, wow. Wow. I don't know. I almost need like a moment of silence. Like this, I just like the way it all plays together is just beautiful. And then now, you're doing career conversations and helping other people do similar things.
And that's the goal. I was like, I don't ever want to have my journey in a vacuum. Like my experiences are not like exclusive or, unique to me. Like my name might be Uniqueka, but like God is like, you ain't that special, sis. Like other people that have the same experiences. And I think about the days I wish I had mentors and people to like walk me through some of them dark, trying times when I was like, up all night, putting in the 50th resume. Like we need to be community for each other so that people understand like this is not the end of your story. This is the beginning of something extraordinary. Like you got to just hold on for like the dawn to break.
Right.
Like, but if I'm not out telling that story, then how many people gave up?
Yeah, you don't hear those stories because it's all survivorship bias. You only hear the people that made it through.
Right.
People that don't make it.
Right. Yeah. Like, oh, I'm doing magical, amazing things. But we didn't talk about the time like you was like, I'm glad I got some peanut butter to go with this jelly. Like,
right.
We ain't talking about that.
Like, yeah. Well, what's next for? Well, what's next for a career conversation? So you're at a point now. You're doing. I mean, it's the beginning of May. You got 7 episodes this month, so that's at least 2 a week. Doing it on LinkedIn. You're getting messages. Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna stick to weekly for broadcast. I think it's way too much for me to like put it all out there. Like the point is for me to kind of create some space now that I've really committed to career conversations being a part of my life, making it work for me and not making it, like you said, how do you manage being a wife and having a job and all this. I've got to create structure around it so that I have a life. B, also that I'm creating structure so that if I want to invite the Joe Rogan team at some point in my life, there is space for them. And you can't do that if you're all over the place being like, sometimes I do this, but then sometimes there needs to be some consistent structure so that when you're teaching and educating people about the process or what needs to happen, or if they're bringing new ideas to you, you have a framework to work with. So what's next for career conversations? I really want to this year have a guest from each continent. Like that's a like random crazy goal. I know like this is
Okay.
super relevant, but I want to like bring this to a space where it's a much more global conversation. That's the other reason like I'm reaching out to different people in different places. I had my first international guest a couple of weeks ago from India. She's a graphic artist and her story is amazing. She talks about how she actually went to go to school to be an engineer and self-taught to be a graphic artist. So that's my goal, is to like to shrink the world over the next like year, is to shrink the world so that people can have access to stories from the viewpoints of people that are not just Americans. I think sometimes we think we are the world, and that's dangerous as well.
Right.
I want to get a little bit more precise in the way that I promote my shows and do the scheduling. I think that's really important to me. Maybe year 3, I might get to the place where I've got a solid audience and sponsorship. But right now, I'm very much chugging away on the thing that we talked about earlier. Oh, it's got to be perfect. I was like, it doesn't have to be perfect, but I know for myself, based on my own skill set and experience, I have the capacity to make it better. But before I could focus on making it better, I had to get it done.
Wow.
And so now that we've got a solid process around getting it done, that's like, now how do we do it better?
Right.
And so that's where I'm at now. I'm like, okay, so what does better look like to me? And I have to define that for myself. Does that mean, more international guests? I think that's important, but also like consistency and length. Do I have an intro song? All those little things. Updating my website because it's a hot mess. Like, but if I didn't get started, it wouldn't exist.
Right.
And that's what I tell people, like, dare to do it ugly. Or I think one of my favorite coaches on like Facebook, Boss Architect Kendra, was like if you can't do it unsexy, then you sure can't do it sexy. So you gotta do it ugly. Like you just gotta do it ugly the first time. Like it's okay if it's ugly. It's like trying to learn how to do your makeup. It's probably gonna be a hot mess the first few times.
Yeah. Well, very good. Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I'm super pumped with what we discussed today, and I don't know, I'm happy to just wrap it up here. I think this is what I love about this is like we're capturing a moment in time. You're taking career conversations to the next level. You got past the I just want to do it phase. Like you now have a body of work, and let's, I don't know, like you said, the promotion level. Let's get some sponsorships. Like I love like to be able to capture you at this point in the process is I think it's truly a blessing, and I appreciate you, Uniqueka.
Look, you're giving me chills. Like this is about to be epic, and I don't know it yet. Thank you.
Why not? Why not you?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. Everybody, remember to go for it.
Right. Oh yeah. So how can people find you?
Oh, uniquekawalcott.com. That's UNIQUEKA Walcott.com. Find me on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram at Uniqueka Walcott. Heck, call me. I'm pretty sure my number is on LinkedIn. I'm happy to help however I can help, if it's, career advice or just, somebody to talk you off the ledge on a bad day, like, let me know.
That's noble. I love it. Excellent. Well, till next time, Uniqueka.
Later, guys.